Eli Torres slept most nights under the 6th Street Bridge in Los Angeles. The city hummed and buzzed above him, but under that old concrete span, time slowed to a quiet crawl. He had a patchwork blanket, a weathered shopping cart filled with the entirety of his belongings, and a notebook, tattered, smudged, and half full of scribbles. People walked past him every day, hardly sparing a glance. To them, he was just that guy with the notebook, mumbling to himself, occasionally laughing, and sometimes staring hard at the sunrise like it was trying to tell him something. But inside Eli was a quiet storm. Years ago, he'd sat in college classrooms, studying economics and behavioral psychology. Numbers made sense to him. Graphs whispered secrets. He'd once dreamed of being a financial advisor, until life, cruel and sudden, swept his dreams away. A car accident, a pile of hospital bills, his mother's unexpected death, and the rent hikes came like dominoes. One misstep became another, and soon, Eli was on the streets. But he never stopped learning. He used the library as his second home. He read everything from The Millionaire Next Door to dense economic theory textbooks. Then one day, he found a torn, coffee-stained copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad in a recycling bin. He devoured it under the flickering light of a gas station and something in him sparked. That night, Eli made a vow: if I can master money while broke, I'll teach others how to do the same. He started small. He scavenged cans and bottles but kept a ledger. Every cent was tracked. He set a goal: save $100. It took him a month, but he did it. That $100 became $200 when he bought a broken-down bicycle, fixed it using free YouTube tutorials at the library, and resold it. Rinse and repeat. By the end of that first year, Eli had made over $3,000. He found a room to rent, the tiniest of studio apartments, but it had a bed, a shower, and a door he could lock. It was paradise. But this was only the beginning. Eli didn't stop at bicycles. He began to understand what people needed: convenience, speed, and reliability. His tiny studio doubled as a workshop. He found discarded scooters and bikes, repaired them, and posted ads on local online marketplaces. What started with one flip turned into 3 a week. By the time his second year out of homelessness rolled around, Eli had saved over $10,000. He took another leap: a mobile bike repair service. It was a simple operation. Just him, a toolkit, a sturdy backpack, and a phone number scrawled on homemade business cards he printed at the library. He biked from one neighborhood to another, smiling, working fast, and offering friendly advice to every customer. Word spread. Then came his first real break. A local reporter, covering a story about small entrepreneurs, spotted Eli fixing a bike on a sidewalk. She interviewed him on the spot. The headline read, "From Homeless to Handyman, One Man's Ride to Redemption." The story went viral locally. Suddenly, Eli was getting calls from every part of the city. With the flood of new work, he couldn't do it alone. So, he hired help, other people who, like him, had fallen on hard times but had a hunger to rise. He taught them not just how to repair bikes but how to budget, save, and think like an entrepreneur. One evening, as he stood outside his studio-turned-shop watching the sunset, Eli realized something profound. The business he had built wasn't just about bikes. It was about motion. Not just wheels turning, but lives. And he was just getting started. One morning, a black Tesla parked outside Eli's humble shop. Out stepped a sharply dressed woman in her late 40s with keen eyes and an even keener sense of timing. Her name was Naomi Brooks, a well-known angel investor in Los Angeles. She had read the article about Eli and wanted to meet him. They talked for hours. Naomi asked questions, not just about bikes, but about Eli's story, his values, his goals. And Eli, unfiltered and honest, told her everything. How he started from nothing, how he tracked every penny, how he taught others what he learned. By the end of their conversation, Naomi smiled and said, "You don't need a loan. You need a platform. I want to help scale this." Together, they formed a partnership. With Naomi's backing, Eli launched Roll Forward, a chain of mobile repair vans and community microstores that employed and trained people facing homelessness. Each location was more than a shop, it was a place of transformation. It offered training, financial coaching, and a safe starting point. Eli insisted on keeping a piece of the original culture. Every employee had to learn personal finance as part of their job. "You fix a wheel, you learn to balance a budget," he'd say. The business grew, but Eli kept his humility. He visited every new store, shook every hand, and still fixed bikes when he could. He talked openly about failure, resilience, and grit. He started speaking at schools, shelters, even conferences. Then, one day, a college invited him back, not as a student, but as a guest lecturer. The same university he had once dropped out of. He stood in front of a lecture hall, holding up his original notebook, the one he'd written in under the bridge. "You don't need money to start. You need a reason. Money's just a tool. Value, that's what changes everything." The applause echoed in his heart. Eli Torres had gone from forgotten to unforgettable. Despite all the success, Eli never forgot where he came from. He still returned to the bridge occasionally, sometimes just to sit and reflect. It reminded him of his promise, the one he'd made to himself when he first read that tattered book under a gas station light. So, he founded From Nothing Academy. At first, it was just a rented room in a community center and a handful of attendees. Eli taught budgeting using grocery flyers, debt tracking with dry erase boards, and mindset development through storytelling. He wore the same beat-up jeans and hoodie he always had, because the lessons weren't about appearance, they were about change. Word spread. Graduates of his workshops found jobs, started small businesses, even reconnected with estranged family. Some came back to help teach. Others brought friends who were sleeping in shelters, couch surfing, or living in their cars. With donations and some profits from Roll Forward, Eli expanded. He hired counselors, life coaches, even volunteer CPAs to help with tax preparation and credit repair. The curriculum grew, including trauma resilience, emotional health, and digital literacy. One of the most popular sessions was called The Ledger of Truth. In it, participants were encouraged to track not just expenses, but thoughts and feelings. "Know your numbers, know your narrative," Eli would say. "You can't heal what you can't see." From Nothing Academy became a beacon. It wasn't just about teaching people to survive, it was about teaching them to thrive. And Eli? He saw himself in every person who walked through the door. Eli sat on a folding chair in the back of a downtown shelter, sipping weak coffee and waiting for the class to settle. It was a Wednesday morning. The air buzzed with quiet murmurs and the shuffle of second-hand sneakers. At the front, a dry erase board bore the words, "Wealth is not a number. It's a mindset." He stood and wrote a figure beneath it, $7.63, that, he said, was all I had the day I made my first investment. Heads turned. The room stilled. "I bought a broken bike chain and a used wrench from a thrift store. That bike repair earned me $25. I reinvested it. And I tracked every penny in this." He held up the same beat-up notebook. Eli taught with stories, not sermons. He told of his setbacks, times he undercharged, or lost a sale, or couldn't sleep from stress. He shared how he dealt with taxes, how he avoided payday loans, how he stayed focused when the world whispered failure. And more than anything, he reminded them they had value before they had money. After class, a man named Darnell approached. Mid-40s, cautious eyes, calloused hands. "Hey, Eli," he asked, "how do I stop feeling behind?" Eli didn't rush the answer. "You don't catch up. You begin. Start where you are, and make your first win. It might be $5. That's okay. You're not behind, you're on your way. Darnell smiled. And the next day, he showed up early. Eli saw those little moments. Each person who started a side hustle, opened a savings account, or negotiated their first raise, as investments with the highest return. People were his portfolio. And it was growing every day. Eli Torres adjusted his tie nervously backstage. It was a charity gala, elegant, grand, filled with LA's wealthiest donors, and he was the keynote speaker. The same man who had once slept under a bridge was now being introduced by a best-selling author and walking out to applause in a ballroom adorned with chandeliers. The moment felt surreal. He stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the crowd. He didn't see socialites and CEOs, he saw allies. Potential partners in a mission that mattered. 10 years ago, Eli began, I had a shopping cart, a notebook, and a belief. That belief was simple, that money is a tool, and anyone, can learn to use it. Even when you have none. He paused. No slideshow, no fancy charts. Just stories. Raw, human, unforgettable. He told them about Darnell, who now ran a delivery business with 3 bikes and a small warehouse. About Jada, a single mom who'd cleared her debt and opened a cleaning service. About Andre, who had once lived in a shelter and now taught credit literacy to teens in foster care. These aren't miracles, Eli said. They're blueprints. Made possible by people who didn't wait for the perfect moment, they created it. By the time he stepped off stage, the crowd was on their feet. Afterward, donors approached. Some handed him checks. Others offered office space, legal help, tech support. But the moment that stuck with him most was when a teenage boy in a borrowed suit pulled him aside and whispered, I'm just like you were. But now I believe I can change too. That night, back in his apartment, a modest place with big windows and well-worn bookshelves, Eli sat quietly. He opened the notebook, the one from his time under the bridge, and added a new line. Impact is wealth. Share it wisely. Then he turned out the light, knowing the next chapter wasn't about him anymore. It was about everyone still standing at the edge, waiting for someone to tell them they could build a bridge too. Years passed, and the legend of Eli Torres only grew, but to him, it was never about fame. It was about multiplication. Impact that extended far beyond one man's journey. From nothing, Academy evolved into a national movement. What began as a humble classroom in a community center spread to more than 30 cities across the U.S. Each location followed Eli's original model, community-led, financially transparent, and powered by those it served. Graduates of the program became leaders. Some ran workshops. Others launched startups with community funding and guidance from alumni. One even became a state representative, running on a platform of economic reform and housing justice. Eli started a podcast called Value Over Vanity, where he interviewed everyday financial heroes, bus drivers, janitors, baristas, sharing how they broke cycles of debt and despair. The podcast went viral. People were hungry for real stories, not get-rich-quick schemes. He published a book, too, The Notebook Economy. It wasn't a how-to manual, it was a manifesto for reclaiming dignity through discipline and self-worth. It hit bestseller lists, not because it promised shortcuts, but because it offered truth. Then came the day the city of Los Angeles honored him. They renamed a corner of the 6th Street Bridge Plaza as Eli Torres Way. A small bronze statue stood near his old sleeping spot, showing a man with a notebook in one hand and a wrench in the other, gazing upward. He brought his students there often, especially on graduation day. This isn't a memorial, he'd say with a smile. It's a marker. A reminder that you can come from nothing and still build something that lasts. One sunny afternoon, a young woman named Priya, an academy graduate, stood beside Eli after her final class. You think I can be a teacher here someday? she asked. Eli chuckled, handing her a fresh binder. You already are. He looked around at the circle of new faces, each one brimming with possibility. And in that moment, Eli Torres knew the bridge he built wasn't made of concrete or steel. It was made of people, of courage, of wisdom passed forward. It would stand for generations. The end.